Now we are in number 3, session 3, application of risk assessment outputs. So the risk assessment measure information or the maps we receive from the risk assessment. This can be used to prioritize risk mitigation measures, allocate resources according to the level of risk, use as an awareness raising tool, utilize in setting up an early warning system, use as an input in designing risk finance options, and also use as a decision-making tool in city planning process. In the disaster risk management, the risk analysis can result to the DRM measures, disaster risk management measures. Like in the risk analysis, hazard analysis outputs like geographical analysis will show the location and extent, temporal analysis will show frequency, duration, and probability of occurrence. Dimensional analysis will show scale and intensity, where in the vulnerability analysis, the identification of elements and people potentially at risk will be shown, with the identification of vulnerability factors and analysis of causes of physical, economical, social, and environmental vulnerabilities, assessment of possible damage and loss, and analysis of self-protection capability, development of strategies and measures at a different level in family, village, and community, all resulted in disaster prevention and mitigation planning measures, physical preventive measures, capacity building, creating institutional arrangements were also resulting in preparedness for disasters like emergency plans, early warning system, and also evacuation plan. What can you do with information? So some of the examples that we used, one is in transport sector. I can show you like risk levels of road sections due to flood, landslide, and earthquake provided to the Department of Roads in some of the government, where they use the maps and also all other work to take a decision in Lao PDA. Also, the risk-prone areas area maps has been used to plan new road alignment in future. In the irrigation sector, also you can see like the irrigation headworks and irrigated area existing in risk-prone areas is provided to the irrigation department, and suitable measures to minimize the risk is recommended for implementation. So this has been some of the work in Laupedia that we used risk-informed decision making for road and irrigation sector. This is in Mandalay City, Myanmar. So national guidelines for integrating disaster risk information into urban land use planning with a special reference to Mandalay, which has been also we did the hazard vulnerability risk and also then come up with proposed structure plan of Mandalay City, which has been then handed over to Napit to the government in Napitao through some sort of ceremonies. Guidelines have been accepted by Ministry of Construction to provide framework for future planning decisions. This is another one in city level earthquake risk assessment in Bangladesh. So quantifying the risk for preparedness initiative. It was more scientific analysis starting with geodynamic modeling, active fault mapping, geoengineering geological mapping, which turns out to seismic hazard assessment in the country. And based on that, for different return period of time, peak acceleration has been calculated, as well as with the risk quantification through risk assessment for 6 cities, along with 3 more major cities in Bangladesh have been produced, which actually resulting in contingency planning and others that I will talk about it in coming slides. The city level earthquake risk assessment in Bangladesh also helped to generate interest to update the existing previous existing Bangladesh National Building Code to update the seismic zonation. If you can see, like it almost followed the overall overall design earthquake that we produced during the CDMP project finalization. So some of the application of the risk assessment results into implementation. One was, of course, this contingency plan, scenario-based contingency plan for city and community level, and as well as we did the earthquake simulation drill for community preparedness. One more example of use of risk information in development planning is, of course, integration of risk assessment result into strategic development plan. We did one in Mymensingh City based on the risk assessment that we did earlier in CDFP. So hazard and vulnerability assessment and risk quantification have been done. Then a stakeholder has been consulted with the community engagement, policy review, identification of the mechanism for land use proposal implementation. And finally, identification of hazard and risk prone areas and demarcation into strategic development of Mymensingh has been completed. So this has been accepted by government. Actually was co-developed with the government institutes and then has been being implemented and mainstream in the city. So the application of hazard map can be used for updating the building codes, insurance rates, business and land use planning, estimations of stability and landslide potentials of hillslide, retrofit priorities, allocation, planning of assistance funds for preparedness, awareness raising for the general public. Now, risk reduction measures. Once we have all these things, how we can go with the risk reduction? We can go from the top, from the macro risk assessment to the very micro risk assessment in facility mitigation planning process. For the macro one, of course, it can be resolved through the planning and also the strategy, where for the facility mitigation planning, it requires more detailed risk assessment, vulnerability and risk assessment. So one of the steps that FEMA has recommended is this 7-step of facility mitigation planning process, starting with organizing resources, assess risk, develop mitigation strategies, establish planning process, maintain the plan, adopt the plan, implement the plan. Where you see this in the facility assessment, the facility inventory has to first check out with the performance objective. What is the use of this facility? What will it be one of the lifeline or the response center, like will it be a police facility or the fire service, civil defense, or a hospital or any school? Based on that, the performance has to be decided, like whether it would require to be functional during an disaster. So as think about it, like during an earthquake, whether it has to be functional, like major hospitals has to be functional during an earthquake. So the performance of that facility should be functional, and where the other down is operational, safety and security, and response mechanism is completely lower down the performance of the building. Where hazard assessment, beyond hazard assessment, we need to then do this risk and need assessment based on structural analysis, and then recovery and mitigation through retrofitting, replacement, and all the other things comes up. While in the facility mitigation planning, we have to look at both of the side, the structural and non-structural items. So structural is like in the human body, we have the structural items are this bones system, where in building, like if it is a frame structure, then all these frame element like beam, column, slabs are our structural part, and the skins in our body are non-structural, but it's still a very important thing. Wherein also in building there are non-structural parts like partition walls, as well as the furniture, fixture, equipment, and other things, which actually contribute to the risk a lot. Now, if we come to the structural mitigation process, we have to go with this overall process, like has been already prepared or suggested by FEMA. So you have to do this survey data collection, data quality control, structural analysis, coming up with the assessment report, discuss with the decision maker to take a decision on the performance, go with the retrofitting, design and financial documents, resource allocation, as well as then tendering, and then structural and non-structural retrofitting happens. Some of the structural mitigation example that I was involved earlier was this is one of the project that has happened in Central Asia. So earthquake strengthening of traditional Pamiri house being conducted by Aga Khan Development Network with the Canadian fund. Also, there are structural mitigation measures through embankments and also dikes and others. The mitigation can be also done through non-structural retrofitting options, which is more cost effective and which is actually can be one of the priority before we move to the structural part, and also after the structural part as well, because this may cause life and property damages. The non-structural retrofitting, the 40% of the non-structural item can be done through using internal resources, just keeping the proper objects in proper places through housekeeping. While the next step is that bracing and encoding mechanical, electrical and plumbing features and furniture, fixtures and equipments in through semi-skilled manpower. Finally, with the engineering skills, we may need to also encore brace architectural components. So there are different mitigation options while it comes in the economics. So the risk reduction strategy can be done in one is replace the buildings, highest initial cost, substantial disruption, value added benefit, of course, because we can go with different design, different sizes, which is added to the value. Single stage rehabilitation, it has a moderate initial cost but substantial disruption and quick resolution. But a more preferred option might be incremental rehabilitation, which has a lowest initial cost, minimal disruption and longer term solution. From risk identification to risk treatment, types of risk treatment measures: to retain the risk, no measures are required; to avoid the risk, where relocation, avoiding mining or land excavation; to reduce the risk, mitigation and preparedness measures; to transfer the risk, insurance, catastrophe bond, etc. Measures for risk reduction, measures to mitigate the risk, measures to improve the preparedness. So measures could be structural, man-made measures, structural ecosystem-based measures, forest management, bioengineering, nature-based solution, non-structural measures. Measures could be also in the preparedness part, household level, community level, administrative level, country, province, district, city, etc. As well as, of course, facility level. Preparedness measures, some of the examples are here. One is early warning and simulation exercise. Capacity building, a mix of informal hands-on demonstration, education and formal training courses at regional, national, local levels using training of trainers approach. So consideration while choosing risk reduction measures. Multi-hazard risk reduction should be considered, because if we fix only one hazard while avoiding the another prevailing hazard, then ultimately it would be just a wastage of resources. Builds on available technology, ingenious or local knowledge. Capacity to implement, manage and maintain the measure. Locally suitable, practical and possibility of scaling up. Reduces risk of vulnerable populations such as women, children, elderly. Cost effective or affordable, it should be cost effective and affordable, possible for investment, funding, leverage of resources. Potential impact on other nearby locations or other segment of population. People and stakeholders concerns incorporated. Environmental consideration incorporated, and political and stakeholder support is very required. Despite this success, challenges still remain. So major challenge while undertaking any risk assessment is of course the lack of data, quality, acquisition and sharing, limited understanding of stakeholders, rapid urbanization, exposure, vulnerability, that's changing always, complexity from climate change impact and all. And challenges to use the risk assessment, lack of proper communication, limited dissemination or sharing of data, lack of monitoring and follow-up mechanisms, limited understanding of the linkages between risk assessment and policy making, and limited number of champions. So these are some of the very high level recommendations that a holistic approach should be there for any project funding. More capacity building and advocacy should be there in terms of risk assessment and risk informed planning. Monitoring and follow-up mechanism should be there, and multi-stakeholder approach should be adopted while any development planning goes on. Having said that, I'd like to thank you everyone for your kind concentration, attention, and I hope it was useful. Thank you.